Hello and welcome to another Watercolor Wednesday using Dale Rowney Aquafine watercolors in a palette that I've had for a while and I actually really love. I will try to link these from Amazon in the comments. It would be an Amazon affiliate link, and I'm using the Langton watercolor paper, which is 300 GSM but not 100% cotton, so it's not so expensive. A Da Vinci Casaneo mop brush, or I think it's called a mop brush, I'm not actually entirely sure. I'm going to create a small watercolor. I found a picture on Pinterest that inspired me, but I'm not copying that picture. I've used it as an inspiration and I'm doing something fairly different, so I'm not going to share that image. It's going to be an easy watercolor that I'm sure you can share with me, and it will be using the wet on wet technique. I'm just painting in the left-hand square of this at the moment. I am going to cut this page out of my book at the end and use the right-hand page as smaller pieces for doing other practice things with. So to start with, I'm going to wet this entire area with a coat of clean water. After first masking off the lower area so that I can get a clean horizon line, I want the horizon line to be just below the center of this rectangle. So I am just going to put some masking tape on that. You can see the masking tape looks a little bit dirty. It's because I first put it both on the desk and on my clothing to pick up some lint and things so that it doesn't stick quite so fast. I found this particular washi tape actually pulled up some of my last coloring books. So I'm being a little bit more careful this time to first just use it on something. So just using this mop brush to wet the top area and have a nice glistening coat of water. This is very relaxing for me to do. Well, I find doing watercolors very relaxing. I find especially landscapes, I enjoy doing them and using the wet on wet technique. I'm a little less relaxed when I do florals because I want an outcome that I don't always get. So now I'm using a mix of the two blues in this little palette. The one on the left is cobalt blue hue and the one on the right is ultramarine blue dark. So I'm using them, and then I'm also going to put in a little bit of alizarin crimson hue just to make a bit of a sunset sort of sky, and I'm doing what I normally do and leaving some white spaces. I want the top area to be more rich in color, and I do mix in a little bit of Mars Black, I think it is. No, it's Payne's Grey, sorry, that's in this palette with one of the blues or with the blue mix that I end up making to try and get the top just a little bit of a deeper color. And then I mix some of this pink, this sort of alizarin crimson in as well, which makes a sort of violet evening soft sky. Excuse me, I had a sip of tea. I'm sure I've said this before, but I absolutely adore and love doing skies like this. I find it so relaxing, and I would really suggest that you give yourself the opportunity to experience the freedom of playing with this wet on wet technique. Take a largish piece of watercolor paper, if you have a watercolor sketchbook that's kind of big like this one, and block out 4 areas with masking tape and play with different color combinations for skies. If this is something you'd like me to show you with some suggestions, if perhaps you feel a bit nervous about colors, then let me know and I'd love to do that. So now I've left this to dry, the sky to dry, and I'm very carefully removing this washi or masking tape, and it gives us a nice clean dry edge. And then I'm going to again use a coat of clean water over the lower edge. I feel just in looking at this and observing it that I perhaps should have made my horizon line a tad lower, a little bit lower, but I didn't, so I'm going to just work with what I have. And B, if you are copying this and doing this, and I have absolutely no objection to you copying this, it would be great if you linked the video, if you share it anywhere. But if you decide to try this, be careful that you don't wet that sky as you put your coat of water on. So there's just a teensy weensy little bit of dry paper underneath the sky so that the paint doesn't travel up into the sky. I don't want that. Watercolor is a water medium, and so the binder that they put in the pigments to make watercolor is attracted to water. So hence the fact that when you use wet on wet, the paint goes where the water is. So that's what gives one these lovely soft little blends and lovely effects. And that's why you can also get clean lines if you use wet on dry, because the paint won't travel outside where it's wet. Just moving my water container onto the other side so that I don't splatter the page, which I am very wont to do. I'm using now burnt sienna. Sorry, I've got the wrong glasses on. The one next to the burnt sienna is light red, and the one next to that is raw sienna. So I'm using those browns a bit, and then the dark one is Payne's grey. So I mix that in a little bit as well, just to get a darker hue. So I'm mixing that into this burnt sienna. Gets a nice, it almost looks like a burnt umber, which there isn't in this set. That is the joy of watercolors. You can mix colors so easily without hurting your hands, which is also nice if you struggle with arthritis or painful hands. Watercolor is a gentle medium to use. I do apologize for my arm crossing over the screen. I would normally edit it out, but I thought perhaps you'd like to see this mixing. So I think I like this color. I want it to be a sort of a rich earth color, and I'm very carefully trying to apply it with the tip of this brush. I don't often use this brush, but I decided to show it some love and bring it out of hiding. It holds a lot of water, which is also something that I wanted. I was watching somebody create the most gorgeous florals with a brush like this, which I attempted, and they were not gorgeous, the florals that I turned out, so I will need more practice. But then I decided to keep playing with it. I want this darker, so I'm adding more Payne's grey straight, a sort of thicker mixture straight from the pan on the top, and it's kind of blending on the page, which you can also do when it's wet. So this is quite slow, but I thought I'd leave this as a real-time video in case you're keen to try your hand at something like this, going into the thick mixture again of the burnt sienna. And just adding some water so that I've got a fairly clean, wet brush, not damp, wet, because I want this water there and I want it to pull. You can see how the paint is being pulled down. I'm going to go with that reddish color now. That is called light red. So I'm really just mixing these colors in and letting the paint travel into the water, because where I wet the whole area has dried by now. And I want it to sort of be a gradation of color that comes down. I've got a little hair on the end of my brush. I don't know where I picked that up from, But no, it's actually not a hair. This kind of brush has these two rings that are sort of tied on with some filament, and it was a piece of that filament that was coming off. It's almost like very, very thin fishing twine. I'm not sure what it is. So I want that dark difference, the top there, bringing down the red again. And I just want to get this lower. So in my mind's eye, this would have been a good enough of the earth. And so I'm a little bit sorry that I made the horizon line where it was, but I'm just going to work with it. And maybe create a tree lower down here in the foreground somewhere. And this, my brush is getting a bit dry, but I just want to pull this all down. And I think that's fine. I'm going to look for a slightly smaller brush. I can't decide if I'm going to use my size 2 brush or my size 6, but I've decided on the size 2, and I'm going to go straight in with a thickish mixture of Payne's Grey, which I'm just activating and using, and I'm going to do some very fine silhouette trees. Should I do them here or should I do them on the right? I think I'll do them here on the right. And I want to make the trees a bit knobbly and the leaves just going out. And I want these to be sort of in the distance, so they're not very thick trees. This is a very fine brush. This is a silver black brush with a beautiful point. And I'm just painting them. I think I'll put on some music for you while I paint these trees, because we've done this before and I don't have anything particular that I need to share with you as I'm doing them, just to keep the lines as fine as you can and organic to the tree, to sort of come out of the branch or the trunk of the tree. I hope that you enjoyed that music. It's a piece again from Epidemic Sound where I have a subscription, and the musician's name is Gavin Luke, and the name of the piece is called No War. And I find it quite poignant and quite moving, and in a way, I feel like I would like to title this work, this little painting that I've done, No War, because it's beautiful country, beautiful nature, no violence, no war. So there we have some silhouette painting of these two trees, and now I'm going to have to zoom out, I think. And using the Payne's Grey, again in quite a thick mixture, I'm using it from the little pan, and then I put it onto the palette just to keep it all the same amount on my brush. I'm using my size 2 brush, and I'm doing these little posts, and this is going to be a little fence going along the horizon line. So it's just straight lines that do not have to be perfect, because they're a kind of a farm wooden fence that I think never looks perfect when you look at them as you drive through the countryside. So I'm just quite carefully doing these little lines and trying to keep the top end of the fence as uniform as I can, just with my eye. I've not done any measurements or anything like that. So I just want it to be an organic fence, and I've ended up with a little bit of a blob there, but those are just going to have to be thicker posts. And just carrying along like that, and then the the challenging bit for me is going to be to try and paint very fine lines, and I decided this just can become a piece of grass. One could use a micron pen if you're nervous about painting, or if you don't have a paintbrush with a very fine point, then you can use a micron pen, which I've done before when I've done something like this. I'm letting the paintbrush be almost dry for the grasses, so there's a little bit of dry brush technique there, and now just rinsing it out, cleaning it, and then I'm going to load it again to do the fine lines. So I've decided to change my brush for an even finer brush, which is one of the new ones that I bought, and it's this Princeton Round Zero. And I know that draws very fine lines. So now my heart is in my mouth as I do these, because a blob would not be welcome. So this part of the painting is not quite as relaxing for me. As I'm doing this, it occurs to me that actually fences are not usually right at the top of the post, the line, but this is a unique fence. It's going to have its line at the top of the post because this is how I started doing it. I could kick myself when I do things like this. Why do I not think before I put my brush to the paper? But anyway, we're just going to do the middle line, and it shows it's the fence. I could add a little bit at the top of each of the posts, but I don't think I'm going to tempt fate by doing that, because it's another opportunity for a blob. So I don't want blobs on this painting. That last piece of music was called The Country Calls by a group on Epidemic Sound called Peace Reels, a guitar solo. I'm doing a foreground tree here, which is going to be bigger because it's in the front. I want it to be a sort of a split tree. And again, using my Payne's grey because they're all in sort of silhouette. I love painting silhouettes. I did a course with a foreign teacher teaching about silhouettes at one stage, and she used to call them silhouettes. And so whenever I say silhouette, I always think of the silhouettes, and with such fondness because it was a wonderful course that really taught me a lot. So now at the moment this tree is looking really weird, and I'm starting to have my heart in my mouth a little bit, and I will just have to draw lots of branches to make it look better. It sort of looks like a wonky umbrella for a moment. But the thing is to keep going through the ugly stages of painting, and trees have branches lower down as well, and one does need to remember to paint them. I have to keep reminding myself. I get stuck on the top, and I need to bring some branches and some more color down to the base here. And I'm going to have to be brave with this painting as well and do some shadows. So I want to just bring, this is just damp water. I'm just drawing this underneath those trees, and I'm going to do the same with this one, which kind of activates that paint and makes, which looks like a little hill or something, just to kind of root it in the ground and add some interest. And now I'll need to bring that down a little bit more. And keeping this as just a damp brush, just trying to make the amount of water get less so that it makes a clean blend when it dries. I want more of the dark coming out the top of it. And then I think I need to do some more grasses as well to add interest. And these I'm doing in a brown, a dark brown, one that I've mixed. And because that's damp, the brown is bleeding in there, which is a nice effect that I wanted to happen. It sort of roots the little bush, the little grasses into the ground. I'm adding some of the Payne's grey as well, so there's a mix of the grey and the dark brown. And I'm adding a few more there, just where it's damp, to kind of get that. And then now that that's dried, I can fix this up a little bit more. And add maybe a couple of knobs along the tree trunk. I often see when I watch a video of my painting afterwards that I really should step back from a painting because you can see it so much more clearly from a bit of a distance and see what needs to happen more than when you're right in the painting and busy doing it. So again, just some clean water that I'm adding here, trying to draw it down. And now I'm mixing a kind of a purple to give some shadows, just adding some red into the blue to make a bit of a purple to give some shadows to these trees. Always have these moments of doubt as I start to do this. The shadow does not have to be an exact replica. It can just be the suggestion of a shadow, something happening. Kind of sketching it with my paintbrush. And this one will get caught, sort of cut off a bit because the painting comes to an end, so it again gives the suggestion. So now I've removed the washi tape and I've added the extra branches just to finish the piece off, and I'm quite happy with this. I hope some of you will decide to give this painting a try. Other than the fine lines for the fence, which were a little bit challenging, the rest is really easy, and it was a fun painting to do. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and thank you very much for joining me for another Watercolor Wednesday, and I'll hopefully see you next week. I would love some comments about whether you've tried something like this, whether you're going to try it, what you thought of it, what you thought of the music, what you thought of the process. Thank you once again. Bye-bye now.